That is our business for today. Let's see, is there anyone else who would like to talk to us on anything heretofore never discussed? A secret, new, interesting, curious, startling. Mr. Zlotnick. This has to meet the new, startling, never before discussed threshold.
Well, no, since you didn't ask for public comment on the last session and nor on the letter discussion earlier today. Understanding there was no action taken, but you're so. Greg Zlotnick with the State and Federal Contractors Water Agency. Appreciate it. I know we're late. I'll try to be quick. On this last discussion, just want to ask a question and maybe ask for some reconsideration. On the last issue that Pat brought up about delineating between the secondary and primary zone and the response that there was no difference for your work. And so it was. I think that merits some further consideration within the Delta Protection Commission's work and the Economic Sustainability Plan and elsewhere. They are differentiated for various reasons. Within the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, I think there's differences in terms of how you look at the lands that may be implicated in that process between the primary and secondary zone as well. So I just think instead of just sort of accepting that, I think it might bear some further reflection, and certainly we'll think about it some more and maybe provide some comment. But
it would be helpful if you could get a written comment and thoughts on that in a week or so, because they're just jamming to get the sixth draft out, and the sooner we get some thoughts, the better.
And it's not a huge issue, but I just think the conversations about the Delta over the last decade have always differentiated between.
Ultimately, what we need is a map that has different overlays, and in that context, if you have an overlay of the primary and secondary zone, that's useful.
I think so.
And it's electronic, I think.
Right. And then I'd like to go back to the discussion of your comment letters this morning very briefly, and I'll actually go backwards. The Central Valley, very glad to see you had the comment letter going into the board on that. I do think it behooves a discussion, particularly at the staff level. I've started following that. I attended an all-day workshop they had last week. Generally, I think they're doing a very good job, as your letter indicates. There's not a lot of understanding, I think, of the role they have in the Delta Plan. There's two specific sections. I think one is mentioned in your letter regarding the prioritization of levy investments. That's a direct relationship with you. But then there's also at the end of the section on the Delta Plan that the department, working with the Flood Board and the Corps, is supposed to bring to you a potential reservoir reoperation proposal to deal with flood man and everything. And they haven't been seemingly aware of that too much. So I think, and then how they would fit into the Delta Plan and the co-equal goals would also be important. So I appreciate that. On the BDCP letter, just because Joe called me out a little bit, and it wasn't a long time ago when I was 10 years old and involved, but on this phasing question, and I appreciate that you're just saying it needs to be considered and be a response, but I just want on the record to indicate that as you have discussed, and Cliff Dom, when he was here, discussed, that certainly in the habitat arena, it made sense, pilot projects, see what works, rather than just going full bore immediately. Where it gets problematic, of course, and particularly of interest to our folks, is if there's a facility that goes forward as part of the BDCP. It's very difficult to think about phasing that from the standpoint of permits and certainty and assurance and things like that. There might be an ability to phase construction, if you will, if that makes sense, and there are others that deal with that. But certainly the notion of phasing that we've heard from some quarters where you start with, say, 3,000 CFS, and then if that seems to be okay, then come back and get a permit for more. That's kind of a non-starter for our folks, considering the money that's involved. So it's under analysis, and that's being looked at, but that would be very problematic, and I just wanted to put that out there. And then lastly, in danger of making Supervisor Natoli a little nervous, wanted to thank you for the letter regarding the State Board. We thought that the process went well in terms of the communication and having an opportunity to discuss concerns, and that generally I think that resulted put into context a lot of the issues that we'd had heartburn about in a much better way, and which I think Joe would agree is actually much more focused on what you're trying to convey to the board to consider as they move forward. So I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.